So hello everybody. So I'm Stéphane Landelle. I'm the CEO of Gatling Corp, and I'm here today to talk to you about Gatling and how to use Gatling to load test your web apps, and for example, S3 buckets. So before we start, just a few words about our company. So we are the editor of Gatling. So Gatling is an open source project, but so we do most of the work on the open source project, and also so provide traditional professional services such as training, mentoring, consulting. Also provide an enterprise version built on top of the open source version, which is named FrontLine. So a few words about load testing if you're not familiar with it. Load testing is about simulating traffic and users' behaviors against a website or an internal application for back office or whatever. It's a bit different from what I would call URL bashers, tools such as Apache Benchmark, and that just hit an URL over and over again. Those tools are actually mostly intended for people who actually develop HTTP stacks or TCP stacks. If you use those tools to load test against your regular application, you will most likely actually load test your caches, and not your real application, and not the way your application under test won't behave the way it behaves on production, on your live system, where you have some statistical discrepancy, something like this, and different behaviors, and then people would fetch different records in the database, etc. So what I often see in, frankly, most organizations is that people don't really care about this kind of tests, and actually kind of either crossing fingers that I think will go fine when they will go live, or just look the other way when they have some issues. Nowadays, the traffic that the challenges that our applications have to overcome are very different from what they were 10 years ago. The traffic now is huge. The data that we have to our applications have to manipulate is really huge. We have to go faster and faster on markets. And you cannot miss the opportunity to go live at the scheduled time and figure out that, oh, actually my architecture sucks, my software sucks, and I have to delay the time I can go to the market by 2 months or 3 months or more. Also, brand images are very, very important on the internet, and if you're and really your e-commerce website is really the image of your company. So if your website is very slow, if your potential customers can purchase from you, they will go somewhere else, and you will maybe damage your brand forever. Also, if your application has poor performance, you will really increase your operating costs. You'll be tempted to add more servers. Your employees that would be using your application will take more time to do their job. Sometimes they might get stuck. What if your back office has an outage of 3 days per year? If you try to compute the cost for your company, it's quite huge. And sometimes that's just something that could be simply fixed if somebody would just take the time to look at the issue and try to fix it. So really try to simulate some traffic against your system before going live. So a few words about Gatling. So Gatling is an open source project. The core is really open source. It's available on GitHub. It's available under Apache 2 license. We've passed the $1.5 million since we started, and the project is pretty popular over GitHub. We are really being used all over the world. It's not a Frenchy project. And we are really used from small startups to huge pure players in the web, companies like Apple or or Nike, etc. And so on top of this open source version, we also provide this enterprise version, which is named FrontLine, that provides you with everything that you would like as an enterprise, that you would expect from an enterprise suite. So more integrations, more real-life monitoring, a real backend. So what are the pros? If you're familiar with the load test tools, traditional load test tools are really graphical user interface oriented. This might have been a proper solution 10 or 15 or 20 years ago, but nowadays it's not. It doesn't match the way that we perform tests nowadays. Nowadays we want to have tests that are maintained. We no longer want to. The value of tests is to provide quick feedback. So if you just do a load test campaign once a year or twice a year, the feedback that you might get will be very, very late. What if you discover that what caused the issue was some architecture choices from 6 months or 1 year ago? You might have to reconsider tons of things in your system, and it might jeopardize tons of things in your plans. So just like the other kind of tests, you should be running load tests from your continuous integration pipeline, even if you cannot run them at full scale. At least if you can run them periodically at a small scale, first you might be able to detect some performance regression. And then your tests won't rot. They will still always be aligned with your development and the current state of your application. And you won't be in a situation where you've just put your load test in the fridge and 6 months ago and realized that all the tests are broken, and even worse, that you no longer know how to make them work, because maybe the person that wrote the test six months ago, 1 year ago, is no longer here or moved to a different project. So the way to achieve this kind of maintainability for tests is to stop using graphical user interface, but use code. And with code, you'll be able to do all the kind of good practices that you have with code, keep things dry, have peer reviews, store your tests in your source control system, and really do diffs and versioning, etc. And more easily integrate with your continuous integration. So for those who are not familiar with Gatling, if today is the first day you see some Gatling piece of code, I think that you can figure out by yourself what this kind of code does. So it's a scenario, and it performs a single HTTP request against the home page, and then do a pause for 5 seconds. Another pro of Gatling is the way that we report stats. Back then, most monitoring system and also load test systems report on stats. Well, you want stats to get an insight about the behavior of your system. Typically, say response time. Long time ago, most systems, most softwares reported average values, average response time. So this is not that good metric. The problem is if you have a bad average value, yes, you have a performance issue. But if you have a good one, it doesn't mean that actually you don't have 20% of your users that are far beyond this this average value. Also, some people also use standard deviation. And standard deviation is also, it's not suited for that, because actually standard deviation only makes sense for normal distributions. So perfectly symmetrical curves, and your distribution never look this way in the real world. So you cannot assume your distributions, measure them. So you can figure out if, okay, I have 20% of my users who are completely off. Also, one interesting thing with Gatling is that, well, as it was designed, the architecture was designed a few years ago, and we still make it evolve and get better. Our solution is pretty efficient and trying to make the best huge usage of your hardware. So typically, if you want to simulate 10,000 virtual users, you won't spawn 10,000 threads, which doesn't make sense even on course. At a given time, you cannot have more threads being executed at a given point in time than you have cores on your machine. And so with FrontLine, we really integrate with all your environment and DevOps platform. So with Gatling, as Gatling is code, you can integrate with your IDs, like IntelliJ or Eclipse. It runs on JVM, so it integrates nicely with the standard Java world build tools, such as Maven or Gradle. As it's code, it's pretty easy to integrate with your CI platform, and we also provide more advanced integration with FrontLine, so with Jenkins, Bamboo, and TeamCity. As it's code, you can store it into your source control system, typically your Git repository. And with FrontLine, we also take care of how to deploy your injectors on remote machines. So we support both deploying on-premises instances, or instances that are already provisioned, or instances that that you would spawn on demand on some public cloud providers, like AWS or Google, OpenStack with OVH in France. And we're also currently working on Kubernetes and /OpenShift support. And with FrontLine, you also have a solution that is really enterprise grade that you can plug into your dev directory to get more secured, where you can support multi-tenant, so have different teams with and people with different roles inside the teams, and make sure that people from different teams don't mess up with the test of the other teams. What's coming? So we are here today because so we're currently discussing with OpenIO, and the plan is to help them, to collaborate with them and help them prove that OpenIO can withstand a load of 1 terabit per second. So I think that we'll start working on this pretty soon after their big deadline with this event. So I think there will be some communication about this in the few months. So stay tuned for more information on, I guess, on the OpenIO and Gatling channels. Do you have any questions?